Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're looking at the recently released Far Cry New Dawn and seeing how it compares visually to its predecessor, Far Cry 5. For this analysis, both games will be played on the PC platform with a Core i7-8700K processor and a 2080 Ti. Both games will have their settings pushed up to their highest value with the HD texture packs installed in both, but I will have motion blur disabled in both games to help produce the cleanest possible image. Also, just a little background for those of you that don't already know, Far Cry New Dawn is a spin-off direct sequel to Far Cry 5. The events of New Dawn take place many years after a nuclear war has completely decimated Hope County, and so, while the locations are the same between both games, they're going to look noticeably different. Okay, so to start off, let's look at the weapon models and textures. Far Cry New Dawn appears to be using the exact same weapon models and assets that have been used in Far Cry 5. However, because of the new post-apocalyptic setting, the weapons have had a few cosmetic changes to help fit in. The weapons you find early on from dead enemies will have a defaulted red skin applied. But once you run around scavenging for resources and manage to build those weapons for yourself, then you'll find that they resemble the default skin from Far Cry 5, only with a bit more wear and tear. Outside of the obvious skin change, the weapons themselves are directly copy and pasted from Far Cry 5. That's fine, this game is technically a big standalone expansion pack, but don't expect to see entirely new weapon redesigns. Each weapon that I tested both looked the same and sounded the same. Next, let's take a look at the environments themselves. Far Cry New Dawn utilizes the same map as Far Cry 5, only 17 years after a nuclear apocalypse. The towns and neighborhoods in the rural Hope County have been all but obliterated, with only the more stable and iconic locations still standing. The town, for example, is hardly recognizable outside of the remains of the water tower and the iconic church. Most of this town has been turned into a scrapyard, and acts as an enemy outpost to liberate early on in the game. This is the case with most of the areas in the game, with only major landmarks surviving, and new shelters being built around them as fortifications for enemy factions. Taking a closer look, we can compare the quality of the textures to various identical props in both games, and this is where it gets interesting. Each texture in the game has been reworked to match this new setting, and it's actually really cool to see some of the work that's been done. Things like the wooden boards on the church are noticeably more worn down and decayed, with paint chipping off everywhere. The railings are now rusted over, and the roads are completely destroyed, with massive cracks in the pavement. A lot of the terrain has been changed as well, with huge sand dunes covering up what used to be tall buildings. Yes, Far Cry 5's textures were reused, but only so that they could be built upon. The stone in this short wall, for example, features the exact same texture pattern, but with a large amount of decay now. Now, what's even more interesting is the eagle mural down the street. For whatever reason, this mural is now much brighter and more colorful than it was before. It's possible New Dawn's filtering effect is making it appear this way, but look at the eagle itself. The beak is now much shorter, almost like a parrot beak. Moving on, let's talk about lighting. Far Cry 5 made beautiful use of its volumetric lighting to create a very atmospheric experience. Walking through the forest with a low-hanging fog looked gorgeous, and these effects have been carried over into New Dawn. However, New Dawn does feature significantly more color variety, and not only because of the new filter that's being used. New Dawn showcases an interesting phenomenon called a super bloom, where the devastating effects of nuclear war have run their course, and the environment is attempting to make a comeback. Animals have been mutated with colorful patterns, and the flowers everywhere are in full bloom, providing a beautifully unique backdrop to the previously simple look of Hope County. This doesn't necessarily mean that New Dawn looks better, but it has one of the more unique art directions in the Far Cry franchise. The enhanced volumetric lighting only helps to bring this out more, and it's definitely a much more interesting game to look at. Next, we have shadow quality. This doesn't seem to have changed much at all. The shadows were already pretty decent in Far Cry 5, and the method for casting them in New Dawn appears to be identical. Special effects are pretty much the same way. Just testing a few of the same elements like fire effects from Molotov cocktails or explosions from plastic explosives, I noticed little to no difference. The game's water now looks like the reservoirs were filled with Gatorade, but the actual effect of the water itself remains the same. And finally, we have some sound comparisons. I personally didn't notice much of a difference with this either, but what do you guys think? And that just about wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. From a graphical standpoint, Far Cry New Dawn utilizes practically everything that was already used in Far Cry 5. Nothing about it looks worse or better. The texture resolution, the shadow quality, the vegetation, the water simulation, all of it is identical. But seeing the same locations only 17 years later being completely overgrown with this vibrant new life makes it seem like something entirely different. The attention to detail is incredible here, and I love that every small insignificant texture has been reworked to reflect this change. But what do you guys think? Do you like Far Cry New Dawn's visual direction, or do you prefer the more realistic approach used in Far Cry 5? Let me know in the comments section, and if you'd like to learn more about Far Cry New Dawn, like all the changes that have been made to the gameplay, make sure to stay tuned for a detailed review. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this posted every week.